So what the Novachord you really liked? Did you? You really liked?
Yeah, yeah, I love the Novachord. It found its way into many movie scores, pop music, all the way up into the '60s for something that came about in when? Well, 39 basically with the Solovox and the versions of that, the JK&L series of the Solovox. And then the Novachord was kind of like the big brother, polyphonic with top octave synthesizer and dividers and so forth. And so rich, 6 modulating oscillators. Everybody wants to build the first synthesizer. And I don't want to call the Novachord the first synthesizer, but it really had a lot of synthesizer-like things. It had an envelope where when you release the keys, it would still have a decay or a release. It had controllable attack. It had filters. It had modulating oscillators, 6 of them, 1 for every dyad, half step. Because you don't play many dyads in pop music, half steps. It's too dissonant. So as you were playing your 7th chords and everything, each oscillator would be vibrating, chorusing slightly differently from another, which Dave Luce affected on the Polymoog in a different way. But, there are just certain things about sound and music that I don't think are just going to go away, no matter what we talk about modernity and all this. They just don't go away. They seem to be basic kinds of information and ideas that, like it or not, we can't get away. People used to think, oh my God, infinite timbral space. Well, as it turns out, no. It's actually a very finite timbral space. Timbre is what our ears distinguish least well, and so forth. Okay, so there's actually a finite timbral space, and the bottom line is sort of like statistics. Something that can be statistically significant but meaningless. So once you have this kind of a clang sound or a bell, if you have something that's 2% different, who cares? So our actual and I got some of these ideas, I guess, from Wayne Slauson in a wonderful book. I don't know, can't remember. I got so many books. But that idea was what drove people in the early part of electroacoustic. Well, I got all this timbre, Turns out it's just really not that interesting. Debussy sort of did Impressionism partly based on that idea of timbral kinds of things and everything. Very short period of music history, Impressionism. So dodecaphonic music, 12-tone music, serial music. If you don't have harmony and sometimes you don't have rhythm, what have you got? Well, you've got spectrum, you got timbre. And again, very short period in music history. Of course, we still have people composing in 12-tone, but not like they thought. Very short period of music history. Sonata Allegro, very long period of music history. Very fertile form to be working in, kind of thing. So I've gone from being a progressive or even a radical, maybe to being a reactionary, which I think somebody needs to sound that note and be that voice. Yes, it could be me.
So are there any synthesizers that rival traditional instruments?
You mean virtual instruments that rival hardware?
No, I mean synthesizers that rival
piano and stuff like that. Oh, well, all of them in reality rival them because this is what gets recorded. Nothing can rival for me the sound of a Börsendorfer, 18-foot grand piano. I mean, these outrageous with the extra keys down at the bottom, and it's wonderful, wonderful sound. That's not what gets recorded. That's not what gets played at rock and roll concerts. Again, you got that idea about artistry, technology, and industry, and the Börsendorfer may be the most artistic, but it doesn't have much to do with industry out here and public acceptance and stuff like that. So in a sense, they already rival. Artistically, do they rival? Not many. Not many instruments, and one of the reasons is electronic instruments don't have their own literature. With the exception of the Martineau and a few theremin pieces and a scattering of Trautonium pieces, the Martineau, which was taught at the Paris Conservatory, probably has 400 or 500 works. That many, yeah. Not just the Jolivet and the things that everybody knows. Hundreds and hundreds of works. And it has a certain sensitivity because the pitch selecting agency, this hand, and the articulation agency, this hand, are independent. A piano even, a wonderful instrument, but the pitch selection agency and the articulation agency are the same thing. Now, Dave Luce taught me to think in terms of degrees of freedom. Other people taught me how to think about aesthetic considerations. But you need to be able to, at a certain point, think about degrees of freedom. Why is it that you can listen to a string quartet all evening? And I find a pipe organ concert rather tedious after about an hour, no matter how good the music is. Why is that? Well, there are 9 degrees of freedom with the bow arm alone on a violin. I'm not talking aesthetics now, am I? No. Down and up on the pipe organ, and the slats that go back and forth for the wind chest. For the choirs of pipes, and some other things. There's a Gajic accent, how you wait on a note and stuff like that. But there's no touch sensitivity, and and yet it has its own literature that's sufficient to its degrees of freedom. But if you come to personal ideas, instruments that have more degrees of freedom usually are more expressive in the common sense of that word, and they generally have a bigger literature. Not always. The organ has a quite large literature. But I would never compare the organ to the violin in a sense of aesthetics. I would simply say, well, you got more degrees of freedom. And I think it does correlate with the ability to listen to that thing for a long, long time.